So I feel like it's also important to talk about suicide and suicidal thoughts, and actually address that just in art in general, much less as Christians. I've had many friends who are Christian and have had suicidal thoughts. Suicidal thoughts would make a lot of sense if we're living in a world that's broken and fallen, because I think a lot of people would have a desire to leave that sort of situation.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to discuss openly, because of the fact that when you hear that there's a struggle that someone else has gone through, it creates a sense of like not being alone in the world.
Sure.
And I think that's an important thing for us to sort of touch on as Christians and as authors and artists, because I think when you sense depravity, when you sense like, you know, things like suicide, like the problem of suicide is what they call it in philosophy. I mean, it's a huge issue that is actually quite a philosophical stumper for anyone who wouldn't believe in sort of a purpose outside of just existing. Because there's always going to be that question that I ended up at with that philosophy, which was, well, why should you exist? I mean, what is the purpose of continuing to exist if this is just a game that we all know the end of?
Yeah, just a world of chaos and randomness and chance. There's no meaning or significance in existence.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I used to justify that by saying, you know, but we create our own meaning. But, you know, that's pretty much like justifying, well, we lie to ourselves.
Right, yeah.
And if you're a truth seeker and you're looking for truth, that's not a really fulfilling answer. So I think I also started off the story pretty heavy-handed because I wanted to set up very quickly, this is the kind of story this will be. This is how heavy it's going to get. I'm just going to start heavy, and if you're not with me on page 1, you're probably not the reader I'm aiming.
Yeah. I love how literate it is. You know, I mean, you got, a couple of pages in, you're sitting there and you're mulling over and thinking about suicide, and of course you quote Shakespeare. You know, conscience makes cowards of us all, and of course you're talking about the famous scene in Hamlet where Hamlet is, trying to decide to be or not to be, right? The question. And it's really cool because in the frame then you've actually got a picture of Shakespeare sitting there holding a skull. Really terrific. I mean, just terrific artwork. I appreciated how literate, it was fantastic. I loved it.
Thanks. That scene too, I am also pulling a little bit of humor in there too. It's a little dark humor, but when I have been in the throngs of like extreme depression, I do become extremely narcissistic to the point of, in my head, becoming Shakespeare,
Right.
And so part of that too is also playing up sort of exaggerating and trying to represent sort of the very self-centered point of view that I was at the time when I was in the depth of suicidal thoughts, because I think a lot of the times mental disorders tend to, especially like, severe depression, tend to try to kind of isolate us and get us thinking very self-based and not community-based. And so that whole sequence is also very much playing up and trying to kind of tap into that severe depression that sort of feeds you ideas like, okay, this is this is the Shakespearean play and you're the actor, right? And you're in the suicidal moment, and I actually think that's fun to kind of mine a little bit as a writer too, that sort of to talk about mental disorders, to talk about depression, because I do think like those voices, as a Christian, I think there's a lot more to that voice that might be like, you're Shakespeare, you're gonna, because I think there's sort of a spiritual war going on.
Sure.
And so there's a little more to it, but I hope it's also entertaining, and I'm glad you liked it.
I sure did.
I think I found the whole thing very entertaining, and also very, very,
insightful and enlightening at the same time. And there is something to be said about, which is something I appreciate about what you're doing. There's something to be said about the whole contrast of light and dark, and the fact that the light is never quite as bright unless it's up against the darkness that is. And that's something you've been able to bring out, is who we are as people, kind of that natural state we go to of narcissism, of, that depraved humanity that we are, when we're kind of left to our own vices, and how, how Christianity kind of works through a lot of that.
Okay, so things get lighter in chapter 2. Okay, first thing, you get this really heavy style in chapter 1, and then chapter 2 comes along, and it's like really kind of surprising because it's a totally different artistic genre. It looks like, I mean, this is more like comic cartoon, like Sunday morning cartoons, and you tell the story of when you're a boy and you were the unpopular kid in school, and you decided you were going to put on a play, and you guys were going to do Back to the Future 2. And you're Marty McFly, and this is so cool, and the whole thing builds up, and the cool kids all want to be in the play, and the cool kid Chip is there, and you made him like a cameraman or something, and your big day comes, and you guys are out filming scene number 1. You're talking to Doc Brown on the phone, and the moment comes for you to recite the line when Marty says, "Damn, I'm late for school," and you get really quiet and you say, "Darn, I'm late for school." And all the other kids make fun of you. Why wouldn't you say the line, And you had this moral dilemma as a young kid, not wanting to disappoint God, not wanting to disappoint your parents. You just couldn't bring yourself to say that word. And so then, of course, Chip steps up, says the offending word, wins the day, becomes Marty McFly, and you kind of skulk off totally depressed. Excellent storytelling. I loved it. Of course, I was a big Marty McFly fan. But you're going back in time now. You're kind of laying some foundations of maybe some of your issues are stemming from the childhood playground. Tell us about it.
Well, that you described that extremely well. Yeah, that's like I said, all of these are extremely true stories, but they're also told with an intent. So, part of what I'm getting at with this second arc is to kind of touch on sort of how even as a child, I was wanting to have full control over my circumstances. Like, I figured if I stacked the deck right, I'd have the whole playground sort of, working at my whim.
And you were so close.
and a lot of it stems from like this sort of narrative that's going to be reinforced throughout the whole thing, which is a lot of it's going to be a lot of hard work and effort to sort of have that humanitarian reality where you're in control, you're the ruler, and you get to dictate to everyone else like sort of how everything happens, and a lot of hard work and groundwork to sort of build something that eventually falls.
Right.
And I part of why I'm heading there too is because I first off, I wanted to lighten the mood a little bit.
You succeeded.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
And I wanted the style to sort of refer to old-timey cartoons. A lot of it, has direct references to like Seeger, like E.C. Seeger, who did Popeye. Like the thumbnail movies where you can cut it out and make your own thumbnail movie.
Okay, right.
But a lot of it's also to try to bring that nostalgia from that era. So I'm glad you liked that part, that the second chapter. It's definitely something I plan to do for the rest of Quarterly Stories, is to sort of shift gears stylistically, so that the style can fit the mood of the story.
Right.
That's something I always appreciate when artists are capable of doing, instead of just being pigeonholed into one specific style.
I found it. Not only did the style lighten the mood, Chapter 1 was so heavy, not just content-wise, it was heavy art-wise. I mean, very, very rich illustrations. And boy, the break when you got to Chapter 2 is like, oh, now I'm just kind of reading the Sunday morning comics. This is it really flowed. Your marrying of the artistic style with the content is just superb. So I really look forward to see what you come up with next.
Yeah, and if you would like to check it out, quarterlystories.com or Joshua Kemble, KEMBLE.com to check out.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is BLE. What do I know? Yeah.
To check out all the cool stuff. He's got a store. You can buy all sorts of illustrations and everything else. And his stuff has, not only do you have an old school kind of appeal to some of your comic stuff, but we're straight 1920s propaganda posters in there.
This is
1800. I mean, it's
and you do these puns. You do these the famous person pun illustrations, which are really great. Like you can get a T-shirt or something with Einstein on it, and basically it's a giant beer stein in the face of Einstein. So
I was a
great.
particular fan of the Pugs from Space poster myself.
The Pugs from Space.
Pugs from Space.
I must have missed that one. My favorite illustration,
pugs,
Joshua.
aliens,
my favorite illustration
50s,
is Vintage Pretension, which is a masterful illustration. Vintage Pretension. So check it out at joshuakemble.com.
And we are out of time. Joshua, thanks for coming on the show and telling us a little about your work and who you are as a person. We hope it's encouraging to a few people after that. And if you'd like to know more about Dead Reckoning, visit our website, deadreckoning.tv. You can follow us on Twitter at DReckoningTV, as well as Facebook. Again, Dead Reckoning on Facebook. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week, tomorrow,
whenever. Actually, we'll never see them, but they will see us.
Whatever. I'm Jay Friesen.
Brian Mattson.
This is Dead Reckoning.